Welcome back to FURYCAST. On today's show, I have a very popular YouTuber, a successful comic book creator, and he's even a full-time letterer. We talk about his hit comic Battle Brick Road. Today on the show, I have Mr. Eric Weathers. But first, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. You can also comment on this video and let it play to the end. And don't forget to stay up to date with my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild. Link to the mailing list is in the description. That's right, e-bike analysis art on full display. And now for my interview with Mr. Eric Weathers. So take me back to a young Eric in Kansas. What was it like growing up? What led you down the road to being a successful comic book artist and letterer?
Yeah, I mean, it was normal, I guess, 90s childhood, just watching cartoons and playing Sega Genesis on my 13-inch TV in my brother's room because he had the TV and I didn't. And, having a good time.
And so what age was it you first discovered comic books?
I don't have like a seeing a light moment with comics. It was just sort of always around because back then I felt like they always were around.
So if it was the 90s, yeah, that was the boom. So I'm sure they were everywhere.
Yeah, they certainly were. I had started, you'd see them at the rack on the grocery store, and I'd just grab anything that looked good. And I would get, my friends were into, most of it was the trading cards because that was easy to see a lot of different artwork and sort of, you trade with your friends and you'd have your binder. And you're like, oh, I'll trade you two of these for one of those, Daredevil or whatever it was. And, after school it'd be like the Fox Kids and we'd watch Batman, we watch X-Men and run around the backyard and, shoot BB guns at each other, and just sort of like stay up, play Sega, read comics, draw comics. It was just sort of like, I don't know, just a creative childhood, and that there was always something that was sparking my interest, and comics was obviously a big part of that.
Were your parents on board with your creativity?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my dad, he was an artist. He drew a lot when he was younger. Almost went into advertising, like that's what he wanted to do, but had kids and had to get a real job. He did auto body work and things like that, but they were always very supportive. I think when I was kindergarten, first grade, he built a drawing desk like that would fold down from the wall so I could just sit and draw, copy my Ninja Turtle coloring books and come up with whatever. Yeah.
I interviewed Joe Santag recently, the artist, you know who Joe is, right?
Yeah, of course.
Reaper Destroyer. And he has the same story. His dad was a carpenter and he built him his first drawing table. He built him a light table. Yeah. And
that's great.
I told my wife that story. She's like, well, did you tell your story? My story is the exact opposite. It's like if I wanted something, my parents made sure I didn't get it. So there's a whole I have the opposite story with a drafting table I won't get into. But so you're the second person that actually whose parents I want to just find and give them $100 bill and say good job.
Yeah, they were always very supportive. Even when I was older, we moved. We moved into a bigger house, and there were more rooms than there were for all of us. Especially after my brother's older than me. He moved out, and I was a teenager, and I was like, I want to do comic books, and so I just took over the basement. So I had my bedroom, I had like my own living room, and then I had another room that was an office that was basically just my art studio. So I had my computer in there, my drafting table, all my Wizard magazines, and action figures, and just sort of was like my little nerd den. And that's where I at least thought I was learning how to draw, but I realized looking back, I was just sort of doodling. It wasn't until I started actually making my own books that I really started to learn. And for better or worse, that's just sort of how it turned out for me.
At the time, were you just taking pictures of like I used to like see a cool cover of X-Men and just redraw it? Were you doing that kind of? Were you doing?
Oh, that yeah, kind of yeah. I would copy that, or like Jim Lee was a huge influence, huge inspiration for me. Like I would get like this anytime I'd see his artwork, I would just there was like this energy inside of me that was like, I have to do this. So I would like go through any comic I could find of his and just go page by like, I don't know how to draw hands. Let me just copy all the hands that Jim Lee drew. So I have like this binder with pages of just hands that I copied from like X-Men #1 and 2 and all of that. Just like every panel I'd copy the hand. That's, sort of how I spent my time down in that
In the
dojo.
lair. In the dojo, that's a good way to put it. And so how old were you when you started making your own books? You're saying that's when you really started to learn.
So I had some ideas that I had sort of written down, little sketches of characters I did in, I'd say maybe junior year of high school. So what's that, 16, 17? I had started, but never completed any of those. I started one that was called it was like Barbarian, and it was basically like Conan meets Batman. I had my own X-Men version with all the characters with their powers and just sort of, I don't know, I guess you could call it generic stuff, just whatever you can come up with when you're a kid. But it wasn't until I was 25, 26 that I started the comic book that I first crowdfunded called Flying Fortress. That was me and a couple of friends. We came up with this idea, and I'd always been that guy that was like, hey, I want to be a comic book artist, but I was never really doing anything about it. Really, really doing anything about it. And we came up with this idea, and it was myself, my friend Andrew, and my other friend Andy. And Andy had we had sort of written a script, and we gotten something together. And then he bought a table at a convention, like 6 months out. And we didn't have anything to show, but he was like, all right, we're going to do it. Wait, now we have to get a book done.
It's actually pretty smart. Set the goal.
Yeah.
It's a
deadline.
Fire. It's a hard deadline, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe that's all I ever needed was that hard deadline, because if I have something like that, I get it done. So that would be and it has to be outside of my own influence. I've figured out, like, it has to be something specific. So it turned into, well, we'd go to a few shows a year, but there was like the one mainstay in Kansas City, the Planet Comic Con. And that was the one where I was like, if nothing else, we at least need to have the next one done by next year, and so on. Cause it was, just a part-time side thing. So any extra time we had, we'd put into that and eventually get basically a book out a year, a little 22-page book. And then that went from 2009 or 10 to about 2016. I worked on that just sort of on the side, but learned all about how to make comics from writing all the way to pre-press printing. So it was a very, very good learning experience.
What's your workflow? Do you do your own inks as well? I know you illustrate your own comics, but do you do your own inks? Do you do your coloring? What's that like?
I do everything. Or at least back then I did everything. I did pencils, inks, colors, letters. And now on Battle Brick Road, I do line art and lettering, but I don't color it. It's actually colored by an artist by the name of Vinicius Townsend out of Brazil, I think.
Did you say the name again?
Vinicius Townsend.
Sounds like Lemony Snicket's cousin or something.
Yeah, he's not in the States. I know that. He's in South America, and I think it's Brazil, but I'm not entirely sure. But he colors my work now, or at least he colors Battle Brick Road. Basically, if I do a one-off piece of cover or a pin-up or something, I don't color it myself right now, just because there's so much on my plate with other things that coloring takes a while. And I got books to letter and pages to draw. So
you going digital, or how you?
Now I am. So I had sort of done everything under the sun in terms of what do you call it? Approach, technique, whatever. All through the years, different, like, okay, well, I'll do all this all digital, I'll do this all traditional, or do digital layouts, and then pencil and ink it, digital layouts, pencil it, scan that, print it in blue line, have a pencil and ink page separately, any anywhere in between all digital and all physical, all traditional. And I finally have come to a point where I basically work all digital now. I've gotten really, it was never really comfortable for me, but which is why I kind of would stick to the pencil and ink. But now it's sort of become very comfortable and very much more convenient and much quicker. So yeah, as of now, I am a digital comic book artist.
You're the writer on your books as well.
No,
No.
not on, no, on Flying Fortress. It was sort of a co-write, co-plot. Sometimes I'd script one, sometimes Andy would script one. With Battlebrick Road, I came up with the idea, the general sort of premise for, Wizard of Oz meets G.I. Joe, Mad Max, and whatever that is. And I went to a writer friend of mine who he was working on another indie book. This was 2017, I think. He was working on another indie book called Frankennaut, and I had seen some other stuff he had read, some other stuff he had written, and I was really an admirer of just the way he weaves story. And I said, hey, I came to him with these two ideas because I was done with Flying Fortress and I wanted to make another comic book, and I came with these two ideas, and it was 2018, and I said, let's, here they are, whichever one you want, let's run with it, let's make a book together. And he picked Wizard of Oz, and well, that turned into Battlebrick Road.
Pretty cool. So take me, because when I first, I mean, it's executed well, in my opinion. A lot of people
Thank you.
Have it's one thing to have an idea and a high concept idea. Everything's in the execution. So I guess take me. One of the things I want to do with this show is really get into people's creative process. Take me through your process from conceptualizing that and then all the way to you having a finished book. Like I'll create a beat sheet. I'll beat the story out.
Yeah.
What's your process with that?
Sometimes, a lot of times, it comes with a title will come to mind first. It didn't happen this way with Battlebrick Road, but I have a list of projects that I look at and say, that's a cool title. What kind of book would I put into that title? Or I'll have an idea for like a genre or a certain storyline that I'll make beats of, like you said, and I will pair those things together because I like a cool title with whatever that story is. So like I have, like I said, I have a list of just titles. They all have like a little paragraph, like, or even a couple sentences of just like what this would be about. And because to me, like one of the biggest hooks about a book that make you turn your head is the title itself. It makes you go, huh? So like Battlebrick Road, when we first launched it, it wasn't Battlebrick Road, it was called Operation Zephyr, and I was never happy with it. But we eventually landed on Battlebrick Road, and because it has a sort of like you understand that it's, at least that sounds like Wizard of Oz, right? So I like to have these titles that give you a hook. After that process is sort of like world building. I like to know where my characters are going. So it's everything's sort of loose and amorphous, but I want to know like a setting. So for books, I'll write out sort of I don't know what you would call it, just a synopsis of what's happening in this sphere of this world that this character is in. And then from there, I can sort of visualize what they would be going through and like what kind of plot would fit into it and things like that. I work, I guess, kind of almost disjointed in that way. It's never like I want to make a story that is I want to write a horror story and this is the 3-act structure and now I've written the thing and now it's the dialogue. It's never straightforward for me. It's sort of always kind of tugging at a string here and there and seeing how things piece together or taking influence from things and seeing how I can twist that into something cool, something that I would want to, something that would, turn your head, something you want to pull off the shelf.
What was the nebulous of the idea of Battlebrick Road? How'd that get in your
Yeah,
head?
yeah. Well, it started out after I'd finished Flying Fortress. I was sort of taking a break from making comics because that was a long time. Took a long time. Took a lot out of me because I had done pretty much every step, and that it just wears on you when you're doing that much. At least it wore me down. But I still wanted to create, and I started, Photoshop, and I started doing some digital painting, and I was like, hey, I could. It kind of just clicked, and maybe it's just foundation of years of drawing. I know how to draw, so painting just sort of it just sort of for whatever reason it clicked with me, and I thought, well, maybe I could do like concept art because I love video games, so why not check this out? So I was looking into that, doing tutorials and doing paintings and portraits, and I had done a couple of paintings for a card game that a friend was wanting to do that never amounted to anything, but just little jobs here and there. And at some point I came across this like prompt or idea of, hey, you want to make something cool, mash two genres together or mash two IP together and make your own thing out of it. And I'd kicked around a few ideas, and just for like what would have been paintings. So like, what would the Ninja Turtles look like if they were the Ghostbusters? And then it turned into, what would Wizard of Oz look like if it were a first person or third person shooter video game? And so I started working on the concept art for it, and I just fell in love with it. And it got to the point where I was like, I was going to make it just like, here's some concept art for this neat idea of what Wizard of Oz would look like. And maybe that would be portfolio pieces and get me a job somewhere, Ubisoft or Riot or wherever, fill in the blank. But I love the idea so much. I was like, I gotta like tell the actual story here. What would this be? And for me, it had to be a comic book because that's what I was comfortable with doing. It's what I knew how to do. So it went from video game concept to let's tell a story in sequential art form.
What really made it gel for you was seeing the visual of what you created as the concept
Mm-hmm.
art. Is that really what clicked? And you're like, okay, this is now I can start to see the story, the beats happening.
Yeah, exactly. So I did some very early character designs. You just draw like a female soldier. Dorothy has that blue dress. Well, a soldier's not going to wear a dress, so but they wear that uh, scarf. I forget what it's called. But what if that's like the same color as her dress? So that's blue. Okay, that makes sense. And Toto, well, what if she doesn't have a dog? Because that's people think, yeah, a dog, that means Toto's a dog. But what if it's like a drone? What if he's like a robot? Okay, that makes sense. And then I was thinking, okay, well, this is like in terms of video games, if you think of like a class-based shooter, like Dorothy's okay, she's like regular assault. The Scarecrow, he wears, he's made of straw. That's like a ghillie suit. So he's a sniper, and that makes sense. And then Lion, well, what if it's just a big guy with a big gun, a heavy weapons guy? Okay, that works. He wears maybe a lion on his chest. He's just a regular guy, at least in the initial concept. That makes sense. And then you can have like you have a droid, you have a robot guy who's, I don't know, a little, got a couple screws loose, almost literally in his head. And well, what role would he fill? Okay, we need an explosives guy. It makes sense. He could come up with all sorts. He could make bombs or whatever. So they just sort of they fell into that role, and then you look at it, and you think there's a story here, because obviously there's a story about Wizard of Oz. So you look at these characters, you think, what would that look like of them going down the yellow brick road and rescuing, munchkins from their city from an evil witch, and how do you turn that into a real world situation, and what does a witch look like in the real world? And the initial uh, through line of that first Wizard of Oz story was very, like, I guess you could say Tom Clancy, like, run the yellow brick road would have been like a drug trafficking, thing in like Bolivia or something, and they had to, take out drug cartels. But it's obviously evolved since then. But yeah, that's seeing my characters on the screen was like, okay, there's something here. It felt real. It felt like I could tell a story in this genre, in this whatever, in this world.
So then what's the next step? You have that spark you need now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a direction. What's your next step?
A lot more drawing, and then just basically taking that to Zeb and saying, hey, that was the one he picked. And then he took my idea and then
You
Basically,
gave him all the characters. Hey, this character is a Tin
yeah,
Man. This
yeah. And
character
I
is the
gave him, yeah, I gave him all that, and I gave him my world, the world that I built. He threw a lot of that out, which is great because I love what he came up with. He took just that seed, and he was working. He's a contractor, so he's painting the house, right? And you can get the Wizard of Oz on like Audible for free. So he's like listening to the actual Wizard of Oz novel over and over and over again as he's painting this. He said it's a real short listen as he's painting during his day job. And so he took that core idea that he gave him and took Wizard of Oz. He stripped out all the magic and the whimsical, fairy tale stuff of Wizard of Oz and put my concepts and ideas from my initial run of it. And we've come up with Battle Brick Road. There's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration, and hey, he'll come up with a scene, and I think, oh, this might work if, what if we expand this here? If we cut this, there's a certain cadence, or what's the word I'm looking for? There's a certain
tempo.
I don't know,
Maybe.
dance we're doing here, collaboration that we're doing here to make this sort of as basically as good as we can, but like a unique, we did a lot of test readings of scripts and stuff before while I was drawing it. So he had friends that were writers, and a lot of times people would, read the script and forget that it's supposed to be like a Wizard of Oz book, because we have written a story that is very much its own. And then there are like little nods like, oh yeah, it's Wizard of Oz. It's cool. I like how you did this. I like how you did that. So ultimately it's a huge collaboration story-wise. I'm very happy to work that way too. It's a lot of fun.
And was that important to you, kind of keep the core of the original Wizard of Oz?
To a degree. I think it's more important to him than it is to me, because for me it's mostly visual. So I want certain looks to be there and certain things to not be there. So Wizard of Oz has a tendency to, any remake or other side story or whatever of Wizard of Oz generally keeps that whimsical, I guess you could call it goofy, fairy tale, kid friendly. From my standpoint, design wise and all of that, I try to steer clear of all of that with maybe a hint or two here or there. Like you can look at the four of them and know, hey, this is the Wizard of Oz, but they're also distinct enough that they could be in another place. They could be in a military whatever book or what have you, and still be their own characters. But you put them in Oz, and it makes sense. Like, oh, there's a green city there. There's all this. It made sense as Oz. But I tried to stay clear of like the yellows and greens and the magic and the fairy tale thing, and just sort of really keep it grounded as much as I could.
And now you're working on Battle Brick Road 2, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
How far along you already have a look in your face like I'm not going to tell you much about but how far along are you in the process with that?
We're 40%. No, as far as layouts go, the scripts are done. The scripts are done. I've been drawing it for a while now. That process, how I talked about how I sort of don't have a linear progression for a story when I'm coming up with something. It's the same way when I'm drawing. I have a tendency to like jump around from page and panel to page and panel. So it's hard to say I have, 10 pages done or 20, whatever. But I would say percentage wise, it's like 30 to 40% penciled, and then mostly laid out. There's a back half of the last chapter that I'm still kind of in the layout stages for it. That's very intensive brain work to get a panel layouts and story beats and all that stuff. So, and it's a lot of back and forth. Like sometimes I'll read something in the script and I think, well, I think this might work better if, we move, just maybe we take this panel out, or I need to add a beat because I want to put emphasis on something, or change something to a double page spread because I think it would look cool, or move something so that the page turn has a bigger impact and things like that. So there's a lot of nuance and all that takes place in that layout stage, which takes a lot longer than I ever consider. It wears you out. At the end of the day, you're like, I can't, I do 4 hours of it. And I'm like, I can't think anymore. I run out of gas.
I know the feeling. I'm like I told you before we started recording, I'm working on something with EY, so I get
Yeah.
it. Speaking of which, the project I'm working on with EY Canales, the artist behind Iron Sights, my project is called The Gentleman's Guild, and I'm lettering it for the first time. What's your advice?
Nice.
What's your advice on the letter game? I know, for those that don't know, you stay pretty busy as a letterer, correct?
Yes, I do. That's my full-time job. That's my day job, is lettering. I've done over 100 books in these past few years, um, and many more to come. What's my advice? Stay away from the artwork as much as you can.
Buy your template on Gumroad.
Buy my template on Gumroad. There you go. That'll help. More things like that to come. Just keep it as legible as you can, and keep as far away from the line art, from the characters and all of that as you can. Sometimes you have to make the sacrifice of putting a balloon on a character because of the way the panels are drawn or things like that. But you try to stay away from it as much as possible.
I also wanted to um, pick your brain a little bit about crowdfunding.
Sure.
You're one of the more successful people in it. There's a lot of, I won't say misinformation. I believe that in crowdfunding, it's kind of like, I'm a filmmaker. I've made a movie, so it's kind of like distributing films. It changes every 2-3 years. There's a significant change.
Mhm.
So you've really got to constantly be researching, seeing what's happening in the market now, what's effective in the market now. And I think crowdfunding is kind of like that as well, that what was working 4 or 5 years ago may not be working now, or
Yeah.
but you seem to have one of the more successful campaigns. What's your advice on putting on a successful campaign?
You have to have something that people want. Um, and if they don't know that they want it, you have to show them that they want it. Like, you have to have something that grabs their attention, that makes them say, "Oh, that looks cool." Whether it's a brand, a new kind of lighter, or a comic book, or a movie, or whatever you're trying to crowdfund, it has to be something that people feel like if they don't have it, they're missing out on something. So in terms of comics, that that whole idea of your plot, your hook, your idea has to resonate with people. If you're going to get, that'll make it easier, I should say, to have a successful crowdfund. If it's um, not well received, then people just oh, I've seen this before, or that doesn't really interest me. That you might get a backer or two because they like you, or want to support you in general. But to reach a wider audience, it definitely is IP or idea or what have you. I think it is king.
You
Over
think the high concept idea is better than the slice of life story?
I I personally think that, but you can have that slice of life story within that high concept idea too. Like, you can have them both. I mean, look at manga; they're all slice of life, but they have that, some of have that high concept built in, of that that struggle to overcome something. That's human nature. We do that basically every day. Uh, I don't want to go to work today. Well, you got to overcome that. I don't want to, whatever. Um, but I think that's central. And then what else do you boil it down to? Being able to people to know about it, promotion, advertising. Um, that those two go hand in hand.
What was your
Some
what was your strategy with that? Was it go on as many live streams, and was that the majority of the push, or was there other outside forms of marketing you used?
No, that was the majority of it. We found here that promoting your comic, promoting your idea on YouTube to an audience is very effective, because it's not really been anything like this um, within the comic book industry ever. You might get you might get those very rare ones where somebody would do like a web comic that was really popular, and then they'd crowdfund their printed version and make $1 million. But in terms
Very,
of like,
very rare.
yeah, extremely rare. But I say million, even hundreds of thousands, because there are a few out there that do actually really, really well that were just web comics, since they don't have any other online presence other than that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, back in 2012, Order of the Stick did it. They made $1 million. That was like the first big one. Obviously, Penny Arcade Guys did it. The Scott Kurtz, whatever his comic book is, he crowdfunded a bunch of stuff. Matt Smith with Scurry, all his stuff was web comic, and it's he'll do 6 figures every single one of his campaigns. So that's an option, but that's a lot different than what we're doing, because you have the product's done, people have read it, you've built your viewership, your fan base, what have you, over years and years and years, based off of the IP, which is a great way of doing it. I think it's solid to do it that way. It just, you've got to really, really love what you do so you can stick with it. But what we're doing here is you go on live streams, you promote, and sometimes you don't even promote, you're just hanging out, and you've got, it's live, so the people in the chat dropping links and saying, hey, check out this book. And there's just a lot of good that happens in that promo scene. But it's again, if the IP isn't compelling, then it's going to be more difficult. And we've seen it time and time again. Like, even if you have like even if you're a big name, even if you're like a big name creator, if you don't have a connection to the fan base with either your idea or you as a person, it's going to be really difficult to convince somebody to drop $25 on a graphic novel.
So in your case, would you consider yourself known within CG at that time when you did Battle Brick Road, or what was?
Yeah, I was definitely known when I launched. I launched in 2020. I had done a previous campaign for a book called Flying Fortress, which I wasn't planning on doing anything with, because that was I talked about earlier. It was the first book I had ever done, and it was finished, and I hadn't thought about, I hadn't even considered re-releasing it to this new audience, because when I had launched that book, I had already started lettering. I had done a lot of the big name books, so I'd done Jawbreakers and Graveyard Shift, and it was, I would be on like streams with like John Malin once or twice. I hadn't started working on Cyberfrog or anything like that yet, but anytime Ethan would drop like a chat link, anybody could drop in and say, hey, that's where I pitched my initial idea for the Wizard of Oz book. And so even my first foray was like, oh, this is the letterer that's lettering Jawbreakers and Graveyard Shift, and he's got this cool Oz idea. So the seeds were planted there. And then I had a friend basically say, you have this idea, this book, it's already done, maybe remaster it a little bit if you have some things you want to change about it, with Flying Fortress, and release that. You build an audience that way. You build a mailing list, you build, some credibility, and you don't have to put that much effort into it because the heavy lifting's done, the book's drawn, and you're good to go. So yeah, people knew me because there was a handful that saw me like on Ethan's stream where I first pitched the idea for the Oz book, and I was drawing it at the time on the stream. And then I sort of really switched gears and did this Flying Fortress thing, and it made people, sort of give them whiplash. I thought you were doing this Oz thing. But it was a great way to sort of have a test run in crowdfunding, because I hadn't done a crowdfund. I did a Kickstarter back in 2012, but you get like 100 backers or even less. It was like 60 or something. So that wasn't much. And then you hopefully snowball that into something bigger. And thankfully we did with Battle Brick Road. It was much more successful.
I've noticed one of the newer strategies people have done is they'll release like a 8-page, 6-page, 8-page ash can first, kind of do that as a campaign, and kind of use
Yeah.
that to do everything you're saying. It allows them to go on live streams, allows them to build a mailing list, a reputation, a name. Is that something you'd recommend in today's crowdfunding landscape?
Yeah. We saw Joe Sontag do that with Reaper Destroyer. You know, he had this, it was like this like underground. It was like you had to know like how to get it. You know, you can't, it's not a campaign. You have to DM him or email him to get the order, you know, PayPal him. It's like sliding money under the table. And it felt cool. Nobody had done anything that I had known and had done anything like that specifically. And it was a great way for him to really build up hype in a way that I hadn't seen anybody do. Plus his book looks fantastic. I mean, just the cover alone just makes you, that's a head turner. You know, it makes you go, "Ooh, what's that? The name Reaper Destroyer? That sounds cool." Yeah, an 8-page ash can like that, and specifically how he printed it. It's mini, you know, it's it wasn't like here's a digital download, because there was something about he got something tangible and he printed it and he had, you know, foil cover, and I think he really did a great job. If that's his one test case. I've seen others, and I've thought about doing this as sort of have like a backdoor pilot, if you will. So like, you know, Battle Brick Road 2, and maybe we sneak in a little 12-page preview of another idea that I'm working on. You know, maybe we do that. So you get this little preview, and then you can gauge interest off of, would people like this? I don't know. You know, and it's a good way to gauge without putting too much effort into something. Cause, you know, I've been doing indie comics for 12 years, 13 years, almost 15 years. And whether it's my own or like work for hire or whatever, you hear a lot of like somebody, you know, I've got this 12-volume series that I want to do, and each volume is 6 issues. And it's like, that's great. You're never going to do that. It's never coming out, you know? It's like, okay, that's great. Can you give me 8 pages? Can you hook me with what you're doing in 8 pages? That's always been my advice to anybody's like, how do you start making comics? Just give me 8 pages of your story. It's easy to do. You can write it, you can draw it, you can color it, letter, ink it all by yourself if you need to.
It's a great storytelling exercise.
Yeah. And it's not like condense that 12-volume thing into 8 pages. It's just find a piece. It's like what George Lucas did with Star Wars. And he had his massive Star Wars, but he took that one little slice of this part of the story, even though he had written, you know, all about Anakin and all of that. But he chose the Luke story and started it with that. And that was that one movie. It's like, okay, give me that 8 pages out of your story, or some version of that you can pitch me on. And then we'll see what we can do from there. And again, if you do it all on your own, if you're able to draw, then it doesn't cost you anything but time. And if you have to hire people, it's only 8 pages. So cost wise, you know, it's definitely a conservative way to go about it, and just get your feet wet on even just making a comic book in general. And then if it strikes with people, if it catches fire, there you go. You're the next Joe Sontag.
You said, you kept saying something a minute ago. You'd say us or we. I believe you were talking about the infamous CG. Is that who you were referring to?
Ooh, yes.
So let's talk.
Skate.
I need a sound effects board. I can just plug that in.
Just like lightning strikes and thunder whenever you say comic skate, and it makes your voice echo and boom. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you came to Comicsgate and what your experience has been, and are the myths and the reputation true? I guess it depends on who you're listening to as far as the reputation.
The myths are true. Comicsgate is a great movement of crowdfunded books telling great stories and having a lot of fun on YouTube.
It's a nice little sound bite. I might use that as a sound bite, man. That was
excellent.
Good.
Thank you. How did I get started? I had just finished Flying Fortress, and I'd done the convention scene. I'd kept it very local to the Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, Midwestern sort of central United States sort of conventions. And you run into a lot of the same people, and you run into a lot of the same crowds. And I realized very quickly that I didn't think the same way a lot of these other people thought, call it politically, call it socially, whatever. Like there would be conversations you'd hear and be like, huh, that's what, okay. If they knew what I thought about fill in the blank, I don't know if they probably wouldn't be too happy with me. They would think I'm an evil person. It's just normal views that other people have, just on the other side of an issue. But it was very, very vitriolic. And so you're around these people, and sometimes you're friends on Facebook because hey, we met at the con. Hey, maybe we'll do something together, and maybe we'll do a book. And I had so that was the seat that was that seat is like, I'm not exactly like everybody here. So that was a little, I guess, me being CG before it was ever a thing. I was like, huh, this is interesting. But one of those, I guess I don't know if you call him a friend. I haven't talked to him in a long time. But one of those people on Facebook was I had been out of it because Flying Fortress was done. I was painting and stuff, and he was celebrating. He's like, "We got Jawbreakers canceled, and this is a victory for whatever." And I'm like, "What is this Jawbreakers thing? What are we all celebrating about?" Just curiosity got the best of me, and I looked into it. I saw this Richard C. Meyer guy. I thought, I wonder what he's all about. Started watching his videos, and he's just railing against bad art and bad writing and bad hiring in mainstream. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. I kind of like what this guy's saying. It made sense with me. It clicked with me. And that was back in 2018, I think, maybe into 2017. And at that time, everything was on fire in this scene of us and CG. Like it was a hot topic. And he was talking about this comic book creator, artist named Ethan Van Sciver, and how all the crap he was going through. And so through watching your boy Zach, just a handful of videos, and he was talking about Ethan, and I found Ethan. I watched back when Zach would do live streams, and I'd watch Ethan's live streams. I just sort of fell into it. I just was captivated by all of it. Like I found it like right as the wave, if you will, was really starting to build. And I just sat in the chat like everybody else, just watching this thing unfold, and you'd see all of the discussions going on and all of the, just the fun people would have, or the stories of the Mark Wade thing and all of this. It just watched it all unfold from the chat. And I'm back at books, I'm back at Cyberfrog, Graveyard Shift, and all of this. And as so happens, I had just got done lettering a book for Zeb, who's writing Battlebrick Road. He had written this other book, and I had a friend say, hey, you should apply for this gig. You've lettered your own book. Maybe you could do it as a little side, make some money on the side. So I lettered that book, Frankennaut. And so I thought, as I lettered, I was like, I kind of like doing this. And then John Malin put a post out on Twitter, Graveyard Shift was done. That book had been done for actually a couple of years. And they said they were looking for a letterer. And so I put my hat into the ring, and it just sort of just became the CG letterer at that point. So I sort of have kind of been here from the beginning. There was time before that with YouTubers just calling out the industry, and there was some shenanigans there as well. But I was definitely kind of here from the start. And it's been a wild ride. It goes fast. It certainly doesn't feel like 5 years.
And your experience has been mostly positive? I say mostly because no matter what you do, man, I do martial arts, and it's like there's people in martial arts that I don't like me, or I like, it's just we just don't click. But go ahead.
Mostly positive for sure. Just in general, me being an unknown coming in, like if I were, some big name letterer that was like, I'm Comicsgate, that would have been a different experience. But I think nobody knew who I was, but I was real, like it was it was wild back then. It was like I was nervous because I had built some relationships with people, like I said, in the industry or at least in the indie scene. And some of these people had ties. It was like, am I giving up something here? Like, if I come out of CG, I know they are going, I'm losing them as friends. I know they're gone. I get it. But
So
it's not like
crazy though. So crazy.
isn't it weird?
You can't have
Yeah,
friends you disagree with. To me, that's the
right.
best part of having friends. Arguing about politics or
Yeah,
whatever. That's like, why would I
yeah.
have a friend
Movies
that,
or,
yeah, movies, yeah. Like, I
yeah,
mean, why would I have a friend that you just agreed with all the time? That's no.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's nuts. Like, but I was really nervous to like even just use the hashtag. Looking back, it wasn't ever a big deal. Um, for me, again, nobody knew me, and if I had a friend on Twitter, they would have blocked me or unfollowed me. Big deal. It's and I keep friend as a loose term. It's not like we hung out. It was just we'd see each other at cons and we were friendly at cons.
Were they feeding you any
Uh,
work at this time or?
I had done one pitch for Alterna with a guy for the Aquabats, the band. We had pitched them a comic. I didn't end up going anywhere, unfortunately, but it was a lot of fun to do. But he was one of those guys that, you know, back when Trump was elected, he wore the safety pin to let people know he was, you know, not gonna R word you.
That was a
Sorry.
thing, guys were saying. I missed that one.
Yeah, that was a thing in 2016 after the election. Like you would wear this safety pin to let others know that you were, I guess,
You
like
were
that.
female
And
friendly, I guess.
yeah, and then it came, 2 years later, there's an article about how he was a real dirtbag around women. So there you go, cheating on his wife and all sorts of good stuff. So it's like,
But
all
he wore
right,
the pin though.
but he wore the pin.
So
Yeah, he wore the pin. I forgot what we were saying. Oh yeah, but it was like these people aren't really friends. They're just people I know and that I'm friendly with at a convention. We talk. Maybe we'll go out to eat after, but it's not like I'm inviting them to my wedding, that kind of thing. Um, so looking back, it's like that wouldn't have been that big of a loss. However, at the time, it was nerve wracking. And then I got the job with Jawbreakers, and I got the job with I got the job with Graveyard Shift, and then Jawbreakers, and then Zach did a video, and he dropped my name, and I was like, oh no, this is it. This is when I'm get canceled, and it never never happened. No blowback, and I wasn't on Facebook at the time, so maybe there would have been at that. I had canceled it by that point, so who knows? But generally, very very positive. I've met some very amazing people. I've been able to work with and letter amazing artists. I've lettered over Butch Geis and Kelsey Shannon and John Malin, Ethan Van Sciver, um, uh, Sergio, whatever's the guy that drew the Bible comic book, the Action Bible. Um, Shane Davis. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm going to be lettering the new Pit. Like,
wow. That's
yeah,
that's real, bro.
I have a Kenneth Rocafort cover. I've lettered over Kenneth Rocafort stuff. Like, just this, it's crazy to sit back and think, like, how, you talk to 16-year-old me, like, you think you want to, you're going to draw on your own stuff, but you're also going to be doing this other thing. And it's going to be pretty amazing. And I've made some great friends too. Von Klaus, Clint Stoker, Michael Bancroft, Rob Arnold, Sean Tangetti. Like, I made some really good friends here in CG that these aren't relationships that these are guys that I will invite. Not that I'm married, but these are the friends. These are lifelong friendships that we're making here. And
CG wedding. That could be the sequel to CG vacation.
it's gonna happen someday.
So mostly positive, huh? That's
For me, yeah. Like I didn't go through a lot of the turmoil that and gaslighting and all of vitriol that goes the way of especially a lot of the pros, former
you think that was
corporate artists and things.
yeah, you think that's the deal, trying to take them out before they blow up with their own stuff?
I think so. I mean, right? You see those tweets like, I can't believe my favorite artist came out of CG. It's like, what are we talking about? Who cares?
Yeah, it is kind of, yeah.
You know,
Like,
they're still the same artist. They're the same person now as they were back then. You just didn't know.
I think
That's all
being
right.
challenged is good. I think flexing those intellectual muscles is important. Being
Absolutely. Yeah.
without that, I mean, that's like I said earlier about disagreeing with my friends is one of my favorite things. It's because it's a intellectual exercise. It's like playing,
Hmm.
intellectual jujitsu. You're going back and forth and being challenged.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I dig it. But so before we wrap up here, you've kind of done a bunch of stuff, uh, and you're one of those guys within CG. I think a lot of people are looking up to and want to try to emulate and you know following your footsteps. What's any advice you have for the people out there, including myself, who are working on a project and hoping to be successful?
Wow, that's a good question. I'd say don't be afraid to fail. Um, find something you love and run with it, but don't be afraid to fail because it might not click with everybody. It's I would say start small. Um, like that, like we were talking earlier, that the 8-page thing, even if nobody sees it, like get that done, get something done for yourself. So you can say, I made this comic. And if it only gets thrown in, if nobody ever sees it, or only gets thrown in as an ash can, or maybe you do 8 pages for, somebody else's book, like get something done and keep your head down, keep working. Don't need to argue with anybody on Twitter. Doesn't do you any good. It's distraction from actually getting work done. Have fun. Uh, try to tell the best stories you can, and eat more protein, I guess. Yeah.
And what are the big life lessons that maybe they're not even from comics, but what are the big life lessons you'd like to pass on?
Anytime I hear that life lesson thing, I'm reminded of what my dad. Some words of wisdom from my dad, which was never play leapfrog with a unicorn. That's
It
all I
all
got.
makes sense. It all
Yep.
makes sense now, everyone.
Yep, it all makes sense.
Did your dad learn that from experience? Maybe I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't pry. I just said that sounds like good advice. I don't want to know where you came up with that one.
But I want to thank you for your time, Eric.
Of course, thank you.
And anytime you want to come on back. And it was a pleasure
Sounds
having
great.
you.
Yeah, man, I had a good time.
And that's a wrap for this episode of FURYCAST. I want to give a shout out to Eric Weathers. You can follow him on Twitter at Eric_Weathers. You can also check out his YouTube channel under the name Eric Weathers and his Gumroad, where you can find everything he has on lettering comics, also under the name Eric Weathers. You can also follow me on Twitter at Derrick Fury, where you can stay up to date on everything involving my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild, illustrated by Ebi Canales. Sign up to the mailing list, links in the description. And don't forget to watch Lion Killer, my debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting-Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel, or you can pop on over to the YouTube channel called V Movies. And thanks for watching this episode of FURYCAST. Make sure you like, subscribe, and yes, smash the bell. Till next week. Peace.